everyone, my name's Sarah. Thanks for joining me today. This is my bearded dragon Barney. He is a new rescue. As you can see, he's a little bit derpy looking. He was kept in less than ideal conditions by someone who didn't really research bearded dragon care. And so he has a slight case of metabolic bone disease, but rest assured he is doing well. He's gotten a lot stronger. He can hold himself up on his front paws now, which he couldn't do when he first came to me. He was a bit of a pancake. And because of this rescue, he also came in a very appalling tank, just a small fish tank with inappropriate lighting and no real space for him to move. So I wanted to give him a nice big enclosure to explore, something good that will help build his strength. And that's why I made this enclosure. And I made this video today to show you how I went about doing that. Most specifically the rock background. I have made quite a few of these. I quite enjoy doing fake rock backgrounds for my reptile enclosures. And I just thought I'd share the techniques that I've found work for me and little tips and tricks that I've discovered along the way that make the process so much easier. And I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for watching. So here's a look at my other enclosures that I used this build technique with. So a bit of an arid look for a bearded dragon enclosure, more of a dark rock vibe with some green moss painted on for a jungle python enclosure to give that lush dark jungle look. Then I've got another bearded dragon enclosure that's also got a bit of an arid colour setting going on, but this one's a bit too bright. I don't like the bright orange that I used on this. Then for a skink enclosure, I went for a more bushland look with not so much rock work on the walls because they don't need it, and a tree trunk instead, so they don't climb as much on the rocks. Another skink enclosure with a bushland vibe as well. Once again, not so many climbing rocks because they don't climb as much. And finally, my albino Darwin python enclosure is another dark rock vibe for a jungle type python. So to begin, I got this enclosure off the Facebook Marketplace secondhand and thoroughly disinfected it to make sure the previous occupant hadn't left any nasty germs behind. For this project, you will need expanding foam. You can buy all of these products from your local hardware store. I got these from Bunnings in Australia. You'll also need liquid nails or a strong glue equivalent to hold your foam in place. You will need pond sealer, clear and non-toxic, coloured grout or just normal coloured grout to do your hard covering, foam board. This is an insulation type of foam that's easy to cut. You will also need a caulking gun for gluing, a paint scraper, a paintbrush, knives for carving and sandpaper. For this tank, I'm going to replace the vents as I don't like the positioning on the back wall, so I'm going to put new vents in on the side just because I like that airflow position better, and I'm going to cover the back vents with my fake rock background. Then I take a marker and mark out where my soil will probably come up to, or substrate if you like, and then I mark out where I want my rock wall to roughly sit, and this one I'm doing the valley type rock wall again. So I've marked out roughly where my spray foam will go to create my rocks. I've got an idea of where my substrate will sit, and then I start with my insulation foam board and I place it in the corner and mark out my first main basking platform. I like using the insulation foam for basking platforms as I feel it's sturdier for the basking platforms and it makes it much easier to clean, because I don't know about you, but my lizard's favourite spot to poop is on their basking platforms, and if you have really rough foam for those cases, it's just a real pain in the ass to clean off. So I find that the insulation foam makes a smoother surface, which makes it way easier to clean. Then I cut off little steps because I like having a little stepway up to my platforms for my lizards. So I'm just mapping out the steps at the moment. I put them in place roughly with old plant containers just to give me an idea of what it's going to look like. Then I rough up the sides of each platform so that it's got more rounded rock look rather than a straight off edge. Next I take my liquid nails, set up my caulking gun, and I use that to glue the platforms into place. You could probably rough up the bottoms of the insulation foam if you choose to, if you want a bit of a more sturdy stick, but I don't really think it's that necessary. Now I just glue everything into place. Random objects to hold the foam in place while it's drying, just so it doesn't fall off the wall. And then once it's dry, it's time to expanding foam. Make sure your enclosure is lying on its back while you do this, so the foam doesn't just fall right off, and leave it in that position to dry as well. Drying usually takes about 6 to 12 hours, and you don't want to rush this process because sometimes it appears that the foam is dry on the outside, and if you're like me, you get excited and start carving, and you'll find that it's still wet and sticky on the inside, and then you've just wasted a bit of time. Once you've fully applied your expanding foam, let it cure and expand to its fullest, and then it's time to start the carving process. I use a sharp kitchen knife, and I just cut in angles and map out vaguely where I think a rock should go, and then smooth off the front surface. I like to keep my rocks uneven and give it sort of a natural look by no two rocks being the same. Have a mix of large and small rocks all sort of stacked on top of each other. This is what it looks like fully carved. Before I start the grouting process, I like to take a plastic bag and open it up and lay it out on the bottom of the tank and sticky tape it into place so that it's all sealed off. This will make the cleanup process massively easier than if you left it and had to scrape off the grout afterwards. Trust me, I've done it. It's a big job. To mix the grout, I take an old bucket and fill the bottom with maybe about 3-4 centimeters high worth of grout, and then add in water. And I like to mix this up to a fairly loose, thin consistency for the first coat, as that helps to fill all the tiny holes and bubbles in the foam, which is very important for the first coat as it just sets a good base. So just using my paintbrush, I just completely grout all of the foam until you've got no white coming through. As we move on to the second and third coats, you want to mix your grout into a thicker consistency, as this helps to create a strong layer or layers for your grout wall, and also fills some of the larger bubbles, which makes cleaning way easier down the track, so nothing really gets stuck in surfaces. Then we peel off our sticky tape, if you put it on the walls like I did, and off the floor. As you can see, there was a big mess. And then I use my paint scraper to just remove any excess grout flicks that might have gotten on the walls and the ceiling and the floor. For my bare walls, I spray paint them a light blue colour to give the illusion of a sky, if you like. My next step in the painting process is to colour match my grout with an acrylic paint, and I touch up the edges of my rock wall where I might have oversprayed some blue. Next, I mix a darker shade of the beige to add into all the cracks and crevices of the rock wall. I use a dry brush technique where you put the bulk of the colour in the darkest point of the crevice and then fade it out so that you give the rocks dimension and a realistic look. Then I mix a lighter shade of the beige, and I take this colour and use the same dry brushing technique onto the outermost surface of the rocks so that the most protruding point is lighter and the cracks are darker. Once you've completed your painting, it is time to apply the sealant. I use clear pond sealant as I know it's non-toxic, as it is intended for use in ponds with goldfish and other pond critters. I thoroughly coat my entire rock wall, including the blue background as well, with pond sealant, and I let it dry before applying another coat, and I do this 2 or 3 times to make sure there's a really strong sealant. It's also important to make sure as you seal, you do a coat on the floor every time, so you also get 3 or 4 coats on the floor, as that's where you're most likely to get water buildup in your tank. Now my tank is completed on the inside with the addition of my new vents. As you can see, it's looking fairly naturalistic. Now it's time to do the exterior, if you don't like having a white enclosure like me, or my enclosures are black. So I use a fairly cheap flat matte black spray paint, and I take a piece of cardboard to prevent any of the spray paint from entering the interior of my enclosure, and I just do a couple of coats of black spray paint on the entire outside of the enclosure. My final step is to coat the exterior in a clear gloss spray paint, just to fully seal in my black finish, and it helps to prevent chipping and things like that. So I just do a light coat of that over the entire enclosure and then let it dry. Once your tank is complete, you're going to want to thoroughly disinfect it again with warm soapy water and an F10 solution or the equivalent, and then leave it for about a week to air out outside, just to get rid of all the fumes and anything that could be harmful to your pet. What do you reckon, mister? A bit unsure? All this space is yours, hey? You've never had this much space. What are you going to do with it all? Throw parties? Don't eat the dirt.